It was a golden afternoon in one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Crystal chandeliers reflected the soft sunlight, waiters passed silently as if floating, and wine glasses clinked on tables surrounded by the muffled laughter of the elite. Seated at one of the central tables was Bianca Vasconcelos, heiress to one of the most influential real estate families, known as much for her beauty as for her inflated ego. With her perfectly straightened hair, vibrant red nails, and a shiny designer bag at her side, Bianca seemed more concerned with her social media likes than the plate in front of her. Beside her, her childhood friend, Raffaella, stirred her juice with a straw while discussing the latest rumors from the elite school where they both attended. Suddenly, the glass door opened, and the noise in the room seemed to fade. A black woman entered, carrying a baby, with a calm expression on her face and a confident stride. She wore simple but clean and well-groomed clothes. The baby, just over a year old, had curly hair, big lively eyes, and held a bottle in his chubby little hand. The nanny walked to a table in the corner and sat down with the little one on her lap, rocking him lovingly. It was clear she wasn't there for a stroll. She was waiting for someone, maybe a boss. Maybe she was just feeding the child before returning to work. But to Bianca, the sight seemed an aberration amidst the luxurious setting. She stared at the scene with a mixture of disgust and sarcasm. "Friend, look at that," she said with a mocking smile, pointing discreetly. "Is that serious?" A nanny in the middle of the main hall. Raffaella tried to soften the situation. "Maybe she's waiting for the boss. Maybe he's in a meeting." Bianca laughed louder than she should have. "It doesn't matter. Just seeing that baby with that dirty face and that unruly hair in the middle of this posh setting makes me uneasy." The waiter serving the nearby table glanced sideways but said nothing. The nanny heard it too. She clearly had but didn't react. She just looked at the baby, who was smiling innocently at that moment, and looked at Bianca. Her look wasn't angry. It was firm, of someone who knows she's been judged before and doesn't need to prove anything. Bianca turned her head away. "Poor thing, he doesn't even know where he is. That one's going to be another number in the system." She didn't know it, but she had just mocked the son of the most powerful man in that restaurant, and life was about to become the main course. That night, while Bianca laughed smugly and rolled her eyes disdainfully, the nanny remained seated, unmoved. Her body exuded peace, but her eyes, oh her eyes, said something else. She wasn't foolish, nor was she deaf. She had learned to recognize sarcasm, disguised as opinion, and prejudice, disguised as spontaneous comment. She settled the baby on her lap, gently wiped the corner of his mouth with a cloth, and fed him with the bottle. Her movements were those of someone who had done this 1,000 times before, and there was love in every detail. The love of someone who wasn't just there to fulfill an obligation. The baby, oblivious to everything, stared at the lights on the ceiling, enchanted by the glow of the chandeliers. Sometimes he smiled, sometimes he let out a soft babble, as if trying to speak. But in one of these moments, he turned his little face to the side and stared at Bianca, who, unfortunately for her, was still watching with contempt. The little one smiled spontaneously, pure and full of life, one of those smiles born from the soul. Bianca immediately grimaced. "Geez, he even smiled at me. These babies are all the same, always clinging to the wrong people." Raffaella whispered, "You're exaggerating. Bye, he's just a baby who shouldn't be here." "Oh," she replied, taking a disdainful sip of her sparkling wine. It was then that the waiters began to discreetly line up near the entrance. One of them whispered something in the motor D's ear, who hurried to straighten his blazer and give a restrained smile. Everyone on the staff knew what this meant. Someone very important was about to arrive. Bianca noticed the movement and straightened in her chair. She ran a hand through her hair, checked her lipstick in the reflection of the silver spoon, and glanced discreetly at the door. Her eyes shone with anticipation. "I bet it's Mr. Gold," she said, straightening her posture. "You know, right? He has lunch here every week. I know him personally. My father has invested in his projects." Raffaella raised her eyebrows, impressed. "Really, he always comes like this, unannounced." "Of course, people like him don't need to announce their arrival," Bianca replied with a confident smile. The glass door swung open elegantly. The air conditioning gently blew the entrance curtain, and then he entered, tall, with a firm posture, a tailored suit, graying hair at the temples, and a determined expression. Arthur Dorado, the most respected and feared man in that sector, owner of companies, restaurant chains, and real estate around the world. His name was synonymous with power, and his presence transformed any room. Bianca took a deep breath. This was it. She was certain he would come straight to her table. But then, Arthur looked away from the reception desk, didn't look toward the center of the room, and walked straight to the table in the corner, the nanny's table. The firm heels of his Italian shoes echoed discreetly on the marble floor. Each step of Arthur Dorado carried an invisible weight, the kind of presence that didn't need to be announced. The conversation in the room dwindled as he approached the corner table. The nanny stood calmly upon seeing him arrive. There was no panic in her posture, nor any surprise. She knew exactly what she was doing there. Bianca, on the other hand, froze, her mouth half open, her eyes fixed, her expression slowly shifting from self-assuredness to bewilderment. She blinked rapidly, as if seeing a mirage. He's going to ... The nanny. Raffaella swallowed hard. It seemed so, and then it happened. Arthur stopped in front of the nanny, looked tenderly at the baby in her arms, and smiled a smile no one there had ever seen. "My prince ... Daddy's here." The restaurant fell silent. Some customers stopped cutting their plates. A waiter let a glass clink against the tray. Bianca's eyes widened, waiting for some explanation. Arthur held out his arms. The nanny, with the same affection as always, handed the baby over without a word. Arthur took him carefully, as if holding the world. "How is he today, Rosa?" he asked, without taking his eyes off the boy. "Very calm, sir. He went to bed early, ate everything, and has already tried to say Daddy about 4 times. Arthur laughed softly. "Moved? You're trying to talk, are you?" he said, his voice breaking, as the baby smiled and reached out to touch his father's face. Bianca put her hand to her mouth in disbelief. This baby is his," Raffaella whispered, breathless. "It's Arthur Dorado's son." Bianca sat up slowly, as if her legs wouldn't support her anymore. Arthur, still holding the baby, turned and looked directly into the room. His gaze was calm but steady. He knew everyone was watching him, and he didn't care. "Gentlemen, this is my son, and this woman beside me." He nodded toward the nanny. "Is Rosa, the person who cares for him with more love and dedication than anyone could imagine. She has my complete trust." No one dared comment, not even the businessman at the next table, who days before had been trying to negotiate a contract with him. Bianca, still in shock, tried to compose herself, but deep inside, she knew she had crossed a line. I laughed at him," she whispered, as if waking from a nightmare. Arthur then kissed the baby's forehead, turned to Rosa, and said, "Let's sit down. Today I want to have lunch with my family." And before everyone's eyes, the billionaire sat at that simple table, next to the nanny and the baby, while Bianca sank into her own shame. Tension still hung in the air, as if time had stopped inside the restaurant. Waiters resumed their pace slowly. Customers tried to hide their discomfort. And Bianca remained motionless, staring at the scene with a mixture of shame and disbelief. She, who just seconds before had felt like the center of the place, now felt tiny, invisible, as if she were being judged without words, and for the first time, rightly so. Arthur settled the baby on his lap and rocked him gently, while Rosa arranged a small diaper bag on the table. He seemed oblivious to the stares around him, or maybe ... he just didn't care. "Rosa," Arthur said calmly, "I think it's time everyone knew the truth, don't you think?" She nodded, her eyes welling up. Arthur stood with the baby still in his arms. He walked slowly to the center of the room, where the natural light from the skylight illuminated the floor like a stage. He didn't need a microphone, his presence was enough. Some people think a person's worth lies in the clothes they wear or where they sit. But today, looking at this baby in my arms, I remember the day I promised never again to let prejudice pass me by. Bianca lowered her eyes, her heart racing. It was as if he was speaking directly to her hand. "Perhaps he was," Arthur continued. "2 years ago, my wife passed away after a difficult birth. She was a nurse, a black woman, humble, and was rejected by many, including my family. But she was the strongest woman I've ever known, and this baby is the last part of her still breathing in this world." The silence was absolute. Some customers were trying to hold back tears. After she left, many told me I should hire a housekeeper, a certified nanny, someone an impeccable resume. But it was Rosa who was by our side from the first exam, from the first heartbreak, from the last goodbye. Arthur looked at Rosa, with sincere affection. She's not just my son's nanny, she's family. She's the one who taught him to say his first words, who kept us awake at night, who sang the lullabies my wife used to sing. Bianca, completely broken inside, felt the tears trickle down her face. Arthur's words pierced her like needles. She had laughed, mocked, the son of a man with a giant heart, and the legacy of a woman who had given her life for that child. Arthur concluded, "So, if anyone here still has anything to say about someone's right place, think twice before speaking, because sometimes the noblest among us isn't sitting at the most expensive table, but rather in the lap of the one who carries true love." He returned to his table, with Rosa already standing, waiting to seat the baby. The entire restaurant remained silent for a few seconds, until a customer the most unlikely started applauding, and soon everyone followed, except Bianca. She simply lowered her head and wished she could disappear. The sound of applause faded, but the impact of that scene remained echoing within every person in the restaurant. Many still had tears in their eyes, others simply couldn't stop looking at Arthur and the baby. But no one felt as exposed as Bianca. Sitting at the table, motionless, her face pale and breathing heavily, she tried in vain to appear indifferent. But inside, her stomach burned as if every word Arthur had spoken had been directed exclusively at her. I need to do something," she murmured, her voice trembling. Raffaella tried to stop her by, "Maybe it's better to wait. Now is not the time," but Bianca had already stood. Her legs felt weak, her high heels echoing clumsily through the room as she walked hesitantly toward Arthur and Rosa. With every step, she felt the eyes of the customers following her, some with contempt, others with compassion. When she stopped in front of their table, her face was wet with tears, but her eyes asked for something even she didn't know how to express. "Mr. Arthur." Her voice trailed off. He looked at her calmly, but without a smile, only firmness. "Yes," he replied, wiping the baby's mouth with a napkin. I wanted to apologize," she said, trying to hold back her tears. "For what I said, for my comments. I didn't know who he was." Arthur placed the napkin on the table and raised his eyes to look at her directly. "What if he were just any baby, Bianca? Without my name, without heritage, without status, would your comment have been acceptable?" The question cut like a razor. Bianca felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. "No, it's not that. You didn't know who he was, and yet you felt entitled to judge him, not for what he did, but simply for how he was born." Rosa watched silently. Her eyes were teary, but her expression was serene. She had seen many Biancas in her life. She knew when the regret was genuine, and when it was just fear of repercussions. Bianca took a step forward, but Arthur interrupted with a discreet gesture of his hand. "It's not just about me, or him. You need to reflect, Bianca, because that kind of thinking, that kind of laughter, is what builds invisible walls that hurt, separate, and alienate." She closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears. "I was arrogant and cruel, and I don't want to be that person." Arthur then said something she would never forget. "The words you said, my son still doesn't understand, but one day he'll grow up, and the world will tell him many things, good and bad. But what will make the difference, Bianca, is how many people like you decided to change before that." She sobbed quietly. "Thank you for showing me that." Arthur didn't answer. He simply turned his attention back to the baby, who was playing with a dessert spoon as if nothing had happened. But Bianca knew it had been more than a scolding. It had been a mirror, and in that moment, she saw who she really was, and who she never wanted to be again. Bianca staggered back to her table, as if each step weighed 3 times as much. She sat down without saying a word, her eyes glazed, her face still damp. Raffaella beside her also said nothing, because now there was nothing to say. But while Bianca thought the shame was finally dissolving within the restaurant walls, the world outside was already beginning to react. Across the room, a young man in a black t-shirt and sunglasses discreetly lowered his cell phone. He had recorded everything, from the moment Arthur Dorado entered, to the moment Bianca, embarrassed, apologized. The video was a little over 2 minutes long, but it was enough. 20 seconds after uploading, the comments began to explode. "This scene should be shown in every school in the world." His response ... was the greatest lesson I've ever seen in my life. This woman needs to rethink everything she thinks about humanity. The video spread like wildfire. In less than an hour, it was in WhatsApp groups, on celebrity Instagram pages, on Twitter, on forums, and short video channels. Hashtag the billionairesans. Hashtag respect has no color. Hashtag Arthur DOURADO. Hashtag SheRIU. But was an Heir the hashtags dominated social media. That same night, journalists began searching for information about the woman who had mocked the billionaire's son. But her face, previously unrecognizable, was already plastered across dozens of profiles, gossip pages, and news sites. Bianca was tagged, identified, cancelled. The next day, when she woke up, her phone was flooded with notifications. She had lost nearly 5,000 followers in one night. Her last post, a mirror selfie captioned "Luxury is my middle name," was now covered in ironic and indignant comments. Luxury without respect is just emptiness. You have the middle name, but she has the dignity. I hope this baby grows up knowing he defeated prejudice with a smile. She tried to defend herself, post a note, delete photos, but it all seemed futile. The video had already crossed borders. Meanwhile, Arthur Dorado refused to give interviews. He only posted a single image on his profile, himself, the baby, and Rosa, at home, smiling around a simple cake. The caption, read, "The legacy I will leave my son begins with what the world tries to take from him, respect." And that was what made headlines in newspapers around the world. In the days that followed, Bianca learned what it meant to be ignored. With every step she took, she felt the eyes piercing her skin. In the hallways of her father's company, no one fawned over her anymore. In the coffee shop where she was always greeted with forced smiles and good morning, Mrs. Bianca, she now met with silence or disguised indifference. The invitations to events disappeared. The partnership with a clothing brand that was about to close, cancelled. She who once lived for the flashbulbs, now avoided even her reflection in the mirror. But what hurt most, wasn't the comments. It was the emptiness. In the early hours of the 5th day, Bianca was scrolling through her phone's feed when she came across a new video. This time, it wasn't about her. It showed Rosa, the nanny, emotionally recounting, at a charity event, how she began caring for Arthur's son after his wife's death. Rosa said, with sincere tears, "Taking care of him is like taking care of the hope she left behind. This boy teaches me every day that true love sees no color, no blood. It sees presence, it sees dedication." And in that moment, Bianca broke down. She threw her phone aside, sat on the bedroom floor, and cried, but not tears of anger or humiliation. She wept for the version of herself that was dying and the one that needed to be born. The next day, without makeup, without heels, without glamour, Bianca walked into a community center in a neighborhood she'd previously only known from over the armored steering wheel. She was greeted with strangeness, but with respect. There, she began to listen, to hear stories of single mothers, of young people who'd been rejected for interviews simply because they were black, of intelligent children who dreamed of changing the world but didn't know where to begin. And Bianca, just listened, until she raised her hand in one of the meetings. "I'm the person in the video, the one who laughed at the nanny's son." The room fell silent. "And I didn't come here to apologize, but to learn from you, because what scares me most today, isn't what the world saw of me. It's what I saw and never saw before." One of the organizers, a simple, firm-spoken man, replied, "If you really want to change, Bianca, it's not enough to come here once. You have to get your hands dirty. You have to learn to get up off the ground, because we were born here." She nodded. "I'm ready to start." And so, Bianca began visiting the project every day. Not as Bianca Vasconcelos, the rich and famous, but as Bianca, someone who finally wanted to be useful. The days turned into weeks, and Bianca no longer recognized herself in the clothes she wore, the places she went, or the priorities that once dictated her routine. She, who once lived for the spotlight, now dedicated time to the shadows where many people shone unseen. She helped children with tutoring, served food at community events, visited humble homes to hear stories, and always left taking more than she gave. Social media remained silent. She didn't post, didn't justify herself, because she had understood that real change isn't proven with words, but with consistency. It was then that, on a cloudy Friday morning, upon arriving at the community center, Bianca was surprised by a woman waiting for her at the reception desk with an envelope in her hands. They said it was to be delivered directly to you. A driver dropped it off a few minutes ago. Bianca opened the envelope, her heart racing. Inside was a single card, with fine paper and gold lettering. Personal invitation from Arthur Dorado. Charity luncheon, Flying Roots project location, Dorado, residence. Note, your presence is important. Come as you are. She read and reread it. Her heart raced as if she were re-entering that restaurant room weeks ago. Only now, something inside her was different. On Sunday, Bianca arrived at Arthur's mansion, without an escort, without jewelry, without the arrogance that usually announced her arrival. She was greeted by a smiling security guard, who led her to a spacious garden where tables had been set up for the charity event. Rosa was there, sitting, with other mothers and volunteers, smiling as Arthur's little heir crawled happily around the chairs. Seeing Bianca, she stood up. They stared at each other for a long moment, and then, with a gentle smile, Rosa opened her arms. Bianca ran to her, and the hug sealed what no words could express. Soon after, Arthur appeared. "Bianca, I'm so glad you came. I didn't expect this invitation, Mr. Dorado. I also didn't expect you to take the lesson so seriously." She lowered her eyes. "I needed to be cancelled to see myself, but I needed to live with the reality of the people I hurt, to understand the value of listening." Arthur nodded. "You weren't invited today out of regret. You were invited out of action. And so, I have a request for you." Her eyes widened in surprise. "We're expanding the project. We need someone to lead the new literacy and emotional support initiatives for children facing prejudice. Someone who understands the weight of words and the power of change." Bianca placed her hand on her chest. "You want ... me ... Arthur smiled. "No one teaches transformation better than someone who has been transformed." The Dorado Mansion's garden was teeming with life. Children ran between tables, mothers shared stories, and volunteers organized baskets with donations. Bianca helped with dedication, taking notes, listening attentively, and carefully guiding those who arrived. She felt ... useful. For the first time in her life, part of something bigger than herself. But that day, the universe seemed to have prepared a final test. But look who decided to show up here. Bianca turned slowly. She would recognize the voice anywhere. It was Helena Prada, a former colleague at social events, a former elite influencer, and one of the people who had most fueled Bianca's ego. In the past, Helena approached with the same venomous smile as always, accompanied by two arrogant businessmen who whispered like vultures ready to mock. "I heard about your good-natured phase," Helena said, crossing her arms. "It sounds like a cheap movie script." Bianca remained calm. "If it's a movie, I hope it inspires someone." Helena laughed derisively. "Do you really think you'll erase what you did? That you'll become a heroine just because you delivered some baskets and cried in the nanny's arms?" Rosa, who was coming from afar carrying a box, heard and stopped. Arthur, too, watched from a distance, attentive. Bianca took a deep breath. Her hands were sweating, but she knew this was the moment to show she was no longer a hostage to what others thought of her. "I'm not trying to erase anything, Helena. I'm building something new. And, unlike before, now I listen. I act. I make mistakes, yes, but I no longer run away from who I was." The businessmen laughed mockingly. One of them commented loudly, "The daughter of the elite now wants to teach a moral lesson." Talking about empathy with nannies and favela residents, Bianca took a step forward. "Yes, because they taught me more than any VIP room, helicopter, or red carpet. They taught me what I never saw at gala dinners: resilience, truth, and respect." Rosa approached, saying nothing, but placed her hand on Bianca's shoulder in a silent gesture of support. It was like a seal. The woman, who had once been the target of scorn, now recognized in that formerly spoiled rich woman someone worthy of trust. Arthur, in the background, just smiled. Helena swallowed, embarrassed. "You'll fall soon. People like you can't stand living without fame. Fame doesn't sustain me anymore. What sustains me is the good I've decided to do," Bianca replied, her eyes firm. And then she turned, ignoring the taunts, and went back to organizing the children's supplies with Rosa. Helena stood there, motionless, without an audience for the mockery. This time, the one who didn't belong there was her. The sun was beginning to set, tinting the sky with orange and gold hues that were reflected in the mansion's windows. The garden was full, but silence fell when Arthur Dorado stepped onto the small makeshift stage, holding the microphone with one hand, and with the other, the son in his arms. Beside him sat Rosa, with the serene expression of someone who knew the man better than any journalist. Bianca, discreetly off to the side, wasn't expecting anything. She was only there to help. And so, she didn't even realize she would be the center of the most unexpected announcement of the night. Arthur cleared his throat. Today isn't just a charity event. It's the milestone of something much bigger. Not just for me, but for everyone who believes that people can change and that true change should be valued. The guests looked at each other. Some were former business partners, others just members of the community. Everyone was paying attention. Weeks ago, an uncomfortable episode revealed social wounds that many insist on pretending don't exist. Prejudice, judgment, arrogance. Arthur glanced discreetly at Bianca, who now kept her head down. But more important than the mistake is what happens after it. Rosa then handed a white envelope to Arthur, who held it up in front of everyone. Today, I have the honor to announce the official creation of the Flying Roots Foundation, a project that will welcome, train, and empower single mothers, nannies, young black people, and all those who carry talent but lack opportunities. Applause began to fill the air. But Arthur wasn't finished yet. He gestured for Bianca to come closer. She hesitated. Her heart was racing, her hands were shaking, but she walked. And to lead this project, Arthur continued, looking directly at her. I didn't choose someone perfect, nor someone with an impeccable history. I chose someone who fell before everyone, but refused to stay down. Bianca's eyes widened. Arthur held out the envelope to her. Bianca Busconsages, you've proven that real change requires courage, and that's why I want you to be the director of the foundation. Not because of your last name, but because of everything you've decided to become. She brought her hand to her mouth. Tears flowed uncontrollably. For a second, she considered refusing, but then Rosa stepped forward and took her hand. Accept it. You deserve it. Her voice breaking. Bianca took the envelope, looked at the audience, at Arthur and finally, at the baby smiling in his father's arms. I promise to honor this mission, with every step, with every action, because now I know that true inheritance is not measured in numbers, but in impact. The audience gave a standing ovation. Some wept, others recorded it. But in that moment, none of that mattered. Bianca was no longer remembered for her cruel laugh, but for the courageous silence she transformed into action. And as the little heir extended his arms toward her with an innocent smile, the world saw there the formation of a new story, not about regret, but a beautiful